afternoon, good evening. Thank you for joining us today. This is the 13th webinar in our Publishing Critical Work series. And we are very excited to have with us Stella, who is representing equality, diversity, and inclusion. At CMS, we believe that EDI is a great platform for looking at publishing critical work. So we are really excited to have Stella on board with us today. Now, before I actually request Stella to take us forward, a few housekeeping rules for us to keep in mind. I would request all the attendees to please put your questions in the Q&A box. You should be able to see it at the bottom of the screen. So please put your questions in the Q&A box and not in the chat function. We at CMS InTouch team, one of us would ensure that the question reaches Stella, so you don't have to worry about them. And also, please feel free to put your questions at any time during the webinar, and we'll make sure that Stella gets your question. So how we've structured this is that Stella will talk to us about EDI and publishing work there. And then we'll take the questions which have been put up by all of you. And also, we would love for you to create a storm on social media. So we are on Twitter at CMS InTouch. So feel free to talk about the webinar as it's happening on the social media platform as well. So I'm going to stop here and request Stella to take this forward. Thank you, Stella.
Good morning, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you, Kitty, for the introduction. Thanks to the CMS team for organizing this webinar. I'm very happy to be here to represent EDI. I do have a presentation to take you through some basics about the journal and the requirements for publishing in the journal. And I tried to pay particular attention to our openness to critical scholarship. I'm going to share the PowerPoint, and hopefully I plan on trying to leave at least 30 minutes to make sure all of your questions are answered. So let me start with the presentation. Okay, so let me start at the beginning. Oh, it's not moving. Okay, let's do this. Let me start again. I hope I'm not having the same issue. Okay, what's distinctive about EDI? Well, we like to claim that we're the only journal in management and organization space that is exclusively devoted to studying inequality and inclusion in the workplace. We like to think of ourselves as the journal for bringing those issues to the forefront of management and organization studies. So the journal focuses on issues of equal opportunity, inequality, inequity, disadvantage, diversity, and inclusion. We try to capture that in our title, to be open to how different parts of the world might describe these issues. The other thing that we're very much committed to is promoting both academic and professional knowledge in the field. In fact, we have a place in the journal for what we call professional insights. And these are often invited pieces, or you can suggest a piece, and it is reviewed by the editor along with associate editors. And normally professional insights might be something where it might be practitioner focused. It could be an interview with a practitioner. It could be some type of format that really emphasizes the policy and practice aspect of EDI. And number 4, we're open to contributions that come from different disciplines. So, for example, we get contributions sometimes from sociologists, from psychologists, in addition to people from the management and organization studies field. So that's who we are. Just to give you a sense of the standing of the journal, unfortunately, we're still so focused on metrics in our scholarship, but as you can see, what we're very proud of is that our ranking is increasing. So we are going in the right direction. And this is a very important goal for the current editor, who's Ed Nig, that we continue to increase the stature of the journal within management and organization studies. So, for example, our emerging sources citation index, that's a mouthful. We're on that index, and hopefully we'll be able to move up. Our Scopus site score is 1.9. Our Google Scholar Index is at 25. And the other one that we look at in terms of where we stand is that we're 82nd in terms of cultural studies. So that's just to emphasize to you that we are a very good quality journal, and we're always working to improve that. The journals that cite us the most might be of interest to you. Of course, there's citations for the journal itself, but we also get a lot of citations in gender, work, and organization, because it is an ally. It's an ally in terms of its interest in issues of gender inequality. The International Journal of Human Resource Management, and then Gender in Management, which we consider to be a sister journal, and then Human Resource Management. So these are the top 5 citing journals, but we get citations across a number of journals. Just to give you a sense of how we publish, there's 8 issues per year, 6 to 8 articles on average. So we publish a lot of articles, which is great. We try to get work published as quickly as possible. So let me give you a sense of that. So for 2021, we had close to 500 submissions that we were working with. The new ones for the year was 324, and 61 were accepted, which is an acceptance rate of about 19%. One of the things that we also do is desk rejects, and they constitute in 2021 almost about 40% of the submissions. What's good about a desk reject, and this is emphasized, that we give the authors a good understanding as to why we are desk rejecting the article. So it's not just simply a letter that says your article has been desk rejected. We try to indicate why and give some suggestions as to how the author might proceed. With a desk reject, we don't send it out to review, which means an author can then work on that manuscript and have an opportunity to send it to EDI again. So the average turnaround time that we aim for is about 52 days for the first decision. Sometimes a desk reject will come much sooner. What countries do we get most of our manuscripts from? Well, the most published articles come from the USA, the UK, Australia, Canada, and India. We would like to increase that list, especially from the global South. We are not happy with that. And so we are really trying to encourage contributions from the rest of the world so that we can expand the reach and the number of scholars who publish in EDI. In terms of downloads, you can see that list is a little bit more diverse. So there's more work to be done here. And this is why we're happy to have a platform like today to speak to people. I don't know who's on this call, but hopefully we have people from around the world. Let me tell you about the editorial team. I think most of you know that Ed Nigg is our editor-in-chief, and he has a long history of scholarship in the area, and it's great to work with him. Dr. Bartlett from Virginia Tech, and her work focuses on, if I remember correctly, a lot of work on cultural diversity. A new editor is Dr. Banerjee from Canada, and she focuses on questions of discrimination and inequality. Mustafa Öztürk at Queen's Mary University of London, clearly a critical scholar, focusing on LGBTQI issues and also racialization in organizations. Dr. Colin has worked a great deal on many international EDI issues. He's working now and looking at the question of nationalism in terms of the rise of nationalist movements across the globe. And then Dr. Lee Martin, who's at Deakin University in Australia. So we do have broad representation across the, and of course myself, across the globe. Our social media editor is in the UK, Dr. Kushner. And then maybe some of you have interacted with our new assistant editor, Dr. Han. She's wonderful. If you have any questions about, submitting a manuscript or you run into any glitches, she is the person to reach out to, and she's quite responsive. I think what I would say about our team is really interested in making sure your work gets the right reviews and that it's treated with respect and constructive engagement. So that's how the team looks all together. So what does it take to publish an EDI? Well, it's not different from any other journal. The contribution has to be original. And that could be from an innovative approach, a new context. And I underline that because I want to say something about a new context later on. It will make sense to you in a minute. But in essence, we're talking about the first hurdle is to make sure that the paper makes a significant theoretical contribution to questions of EDI. Number two, it should be relevant. Relevant in the sense that the issues are current, perhaps, but focus on key areas of inquiry in terms of the theory of EDI and even the practice of EDI. And of course, the general criteria for good scholarly writing. That the manuscript is well argued, the storyline is very clear, the contributions are articulated and substantiated, sound methodology, and generally well written. In fact, we do offer to our authors. We recommend an editorial service for those where English might not be the first language. So that's not going to automatically be a negative for publication, but we might encourage the author to have the work professionally edited. So let me just elaborate a little bit. So theoretical, so the article should be grounded in theory and current literature. The evidence, if it's an empirical paper, we accept both quantitative and qualitative research. We don't identify ourselves with one type of methodology. If it's a conceptual work, you can do a theoretical paper that can be submitted to the journal, and we would expect that the theory breaks new grounds or generates new insights. So we take both empirical papers and theoretical papers. Who's our audience? Well, of course, it's other scholars, but we do have practitioners because of the professional insights section, I think. But we like authors to think about that the audience can be both academic and practitioner. So we expect that every paper will talk about the theoretical as well as the practical implications of the research. And advocacy is another important aspect. We want to advance the ways that EDI can be achieved for everyone. So we are not in the sense of saying you cannot be prescriptive in what you say in terms of the practical implications, because we want manuscripts that move us towards achieving equality, diversity, and inclusion. So what are the limiters? What are the things that might limit a manuscript from getting published? Well, number one, and I've been an editor for a long time. This is not distinctive to our journal. I've been an editor for AMR. I've been an editor for Organization, the British Journal of Management, especially for early career scholars. The number one deal breaker is not having a theoretical contribution. And so theory is very critical. So if we cannot decipher the contribution to theory, doesn't have to be new theory, maybe it's going to extend theory, maybe it's going to critique theory, but the first hurdle is a theoretical contribution that is original. It's novel in the sense that it breaks new ground or raises new questions. The second thing is the literature review is not current, where the manuscript clearly overlooks some important research that's relevant to the topic of the paper. In the sense that when you have missing literature, the reviewers may think that you really are not quite familiar or you don't truly understand where the current scholarly conversation is on the topic. Particularly for early career scholars, I emphasize that to think about writing and publishing as a conversation with other scholars who also do work on your topic. And so you have to demonstrate in your manuscript that you are quite conversant with the current scholarly conversation. And then you are able to say, look, here is the current conversation about this topic or theory. That's all good, but I think something is missing, or this research is going to expand that. This research is going to tell you something new. It's going to bring something new to the conversation. It's going to advance the conversation. It's going to move it forward. The other thing is not writing for the journal's core audience. And I told you who the audience is. So we expect that you are clear in how you communicate to our audience. So if it's you just can't write about theory. We want you also to be thinking about what are the implications of this research for the public. Now, number 4 is something that I have learned over time. And this became very clear to me after I left the United States, where I had published, to the level where I was a professor. And then I came to South Africa. And of course, I'm doing research in South Africa using South African data, South African sample. And then the North American-based journals and European-based journals would critique the work if I said, this work is done in the South African context. And so one of the challenges, I think, because we live, unfortunately, in a context where journals and reviewers and authors dominate from the global north, and I put that in quotes, it's not a perfect term. And I think CMS people know what I'm talking about. And so you get this absurd question, what does this have to do with the rest of the world? So one of the things that I think we must avoid or learn to avoid is simply trying to declare a significant contribution by just simply saying, and I get papers like this. This paper is a significant contribution because this has never been studied in Nigeria, or it's never been studied in Thailand. That probably could be true, but I think the most important thing is for the author to be able to articulate why the context is important in respect to the theoretical contribution. We want authors to challenge existing knowledge, because existing knowledge is not comprehensive, but you need to help the reviewers to understand how studying this in a different context, how does it change how we understand that problem or that theory? How does it change the boundaries of the knowledge? And so I wanted to highlight that, because this is something that I see often in my role as associate editor. And so I pulled up this paper. Maybe you could go look at this paper. I'm gonna share these slides, Kitty. Here's an example from a paper that was done on work-life balance and patriarchy. And the sample was from Nigeria. And this is how the author stated the contribution of the work. And this is a good exemplar of how you declare this contribution, but also to bring in what this context, how does the Nigerian context, why is that important? And so you can see from what I'm not going to read it, what I've put there is how the author emphasizes the theoretical contribution, talking about, looking at human agency and patriarchy and using Scott's model. And then the last sentence, the last couple of sentences that I highlighted, he talks about, looking at this in a different context and what that means. So I just wanted to emphasize that. I hope this is helpful to you. I want to share with you too that we do special issues. You can write a proposal for a special issue, and I've given a list of the most recent ones, and you can see the diversity there and the topics. But the good news is we still have some upcoming special issues that may provide time for some of you to work on contributions. I put the deadlines there. If you go to the EDI website, you can read the call for papers and see whether or not you have a possible contribution. And so we are very interested in special issues. They go through a process. If you submit a proposal for a special issue, it will be circulated among the associate editors, and we discuss it, we debate it, And then we work, if we agree to do it, then we work with the team who has proposed it. I'm almost done. I pulled out an example of some critical work we've published. This is not all of it, but you can see that there's a variety of work. We've done post-colonial perspectives have been used, patriarchy, feminism, critical race theory. So we are very open to critical perspectives, critical theories as they relate to questions of social difference and inequality. So you could look at some of those papers to see how the authors use those particular critical lenses to look at questions of EDI. So I'm going to stop there. That's my story, as they say. But I really would be interested very much in answering all of your questions, because we want to encourage you to submit your work to EDI. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Stella. So if anyone has any questions, we've got some coming in direct to us, but if anyone's got any questions, if you can please put them in the Q&A, and we'll send them on to Stella.
Not sure what the silence means.
I think it means people are thinking. So
that's fine. That's
typing,
fine. That's
Stella.
fine. That's fine. It's okay. I just wanted to make sure my system was still working.
So we've got one that's just come in, Stella, and they've asked, and when you talk about theoretical contribution, does it have to be in relation to ED&I specifically, or can it be more general surrounding management with an empirical focus on inequality issues? So I guess it's a question about that theoretical contribution. If you could perhaps give some examples from papers that you published.
Okay, well, I think that's a good question. I think people hear the word theoretical and then they're expecting that you must refer to some grand theory or something. Theory, sometimes a theory may not be evident, but it could be an issue. It could be related to a contemporary problem. At a minimum, we would want you to be able to say, what have people already said about this topic? You know, so for example, one of the papers that I recently published in EDI was just to look at the intersection between the coronavirus epidemic and what I call the virus of racism. I didn't have a theory, but I was trying to think about how these two things say something about how the coronavirus and how viruses mutate, how that also could be a way to understand how racism perpetuates itself. I hope that example can suffice. But I say to young scholars, you know, it's either going to be a theoretical frame that you use, or you could also be working from existing literature, because we don't have a theory for everything. That's how I would answer that. But put it this way, this is why I say, what's the scholarly conversation? Okay, what are people talking about when it comes to that phenomenon? So you could do a paper from a practical lens. You could say something like, you know, companies are thinking that the way to respond to the calls for social justice is to do more diversity. You see, you could start from that premise and develop a very nice paper if you're coming from that lens. I hope those examples help.
Lovely. That's great. Thanks. We've got a wealth of questions coming in. So, so Bertie, if you want to kind of ask the questions and to Stella, that'd be great.
Okay, should I do that? I see them now.
Yeah.
So, sorry.
I could read out the question for you, Stella.
That would be great. Yeah. Then I don't have to do two things at once. Okay.
Yeah. So the next question we have is about if, one of our attendees would like to know if you could elaborate more on the mix between quantitative as well as qualitative approaches.
I'm not sure what they mean by mix. As I said, we're open to both of them. We get both kinds of papers. You know, we get qualitative and we get quantitative. We get mixed methodology. I had a paper the other day that was based on autoethnography. We get case studies. We get then on the quantitative side, we get path analysis, hierarchical regression. So the most important thing always, the methodology should fit the research question and where the state of knowledge is. Again, the coherent storyline is the most important thing.
Thanks, Stella. So the next question we have is that I'm an EDI practitioner as well as a doctoral researcher. So other than a section on practical implications, could you please offer some advice or tips on weaving these two perspectives in a research paper?
Go back to the beginning of it. It kind of broke up the first part of the question.
So rather than just a section on practical implications, is there any advice or tips that you could offer on how to bring these two perspectives, the practitioner and the research perspectives, together?
Well, exactly. That's what you need to do. So, often theory is at a very abstract level, right? So then you should take your practical understanding, which is great because many academics don't have the practical understanding. So one of the advantages you would have is you already have a practical lens. And so you have to really push yourself to say, okay, if my findings are correct, how would I translate that? How would I apply that in a real organizational setting? So you actually have an advantage because I know that early on in my career, I would get very nervous when the reviewers would say, what are the practical implications? You see? So, right? Because so sometimes people are clear about the theoretical and the practical is a stretch. But if you have both of them, you should leverage that and tie them together. I hope that would be easier for you. But just think about this. If you were talking to a bunch of managers, and what I often think about is to say, what would I tell a manager to do? What would I tell an employee to do? If I were mentoring somebody, let's say you've just done a paper on the experience of discrimination for Black females. So what if I was doing a talk with a group of Black females? How would I advise them to handle the discrimination that they faced based on my research? You see? I hope that answers the question.
So the next question we have is again going back to the methods.
Yes.
Does the journal accept methodological contributions in relations to conducting EDI research?
Good question. As long as that method, see, I just had a paper like that. You cannot just say this, my contribution is I use this new fancy method or this latest method. No. It's again back to what does this method reveal about what we know in a new way that we didn't know before, okay? So for example, if you say that, let's take a quantitative paper where all the previous research was based on correlation. I'm gonna take something sentence, correlations. But I have a method that's gonna allow me to show causality. causality. You see that? So whatever you use must expand, change, or challenge what we already know. That's the simplest way to think about it, right? Yeah.
Thank you. So the next question is, would EDI be open to submissions relating to organizational country policy? For example, research policy in a specific country.
Research policy. I'm not, when you say research policy, policies for how to do research, I'm not sure I understand the question. I'm sorry, the person's not asking. I'm not sure I understand the question.
Maybe
Frankly.
we'll ask.
How research is funded. Oh, I see. The person didn't. Well, not really, unless you say that there's inequality around how research is funded. So equality, opportunities, and equity must be part of that. It could be a good question if, in fact, you say the country's policy disadvantages certain segments of the population. So the core anchor is questions of inequality, discrimination, diversity, underrepresentation, social difference, exclusion.
Thank you. The next question is, would you advise to engage the editor before submission with an idea for the submission?
You can approach. It doesn't hurt. We know not to promise you that your paper will be published. What we would tell you is, yes, that's a topic that fits EDI, or maybe we say it doesn't. And then we might say, the points I raised earlier, we may restate the type of articles we encourage. Original contribution, blah, blah, blah. Yes, but it's fine. In fact, I even say sometimes to authors, it's a good idea to write a cover letter with your paper. We do read them. So yeah, that's fine. If you're not sure of the fit, you can contact the editor, because really we will tell you whether or not we think the topic of your paper fits, so that you don't learn that later on when you get a desk reject. Because if the topic doesn't fit the journal, then we do a desk reject letter.
Thanks. So this question is a bit specific. So the question is the journal open to the latest Black radical traditions, Black/Africana existential thought, such as Afro-pessimism, anti-Blackness? Because the attendee has been warned not to take these critical stands because they don't advance critical emancipation ideals in the prevailing Western strand of CMS.
Wow. CMS is doing that? Stop it, CMS. Okay, well, I'm just showing it's funny. I've been doing research on race and exclusion for 40 years. And when I started my career, I was told to stay away from race. If you want to get tenure and promotion, I was told not to do it even in my thesis, in my dissertation, right? No, the journal is open to issues of anti-Blackness. You saw that we did 2 special issues on Black Lives Matter. Yeah, I think what you're hearing is bad advice. Frankly, I'll just be frank with you. Again, maybe I am naive, but given the journal and given the set of reviewers we have, we are open to critical perspectives. Again, the common denominator is the contribution. What does the manuscript contribute So that would be the criterion that would decide. So talking about, you know, radical Black thought, how are you using that? How does it get us to think differently about these issues of EDI? What does it suggest that we do theoretically and then practically if we use those lenses?
Thank you. So the next question is actually connected to something you talked about, Stella, the context and the theoretical power of the context. So
Yes.
the question is how to make sure reviewers will understand why the context outside global north is relevant for the development of the field.
Say that again.
So how to make sure reviewers will understand why the context outside global north is relevant for the development of the field.
Okay, good. Okay. Well, you cannot do that generally. Okay, let's just say you cannot do that generally. Some of those arguments have been made by several scholars as to why. I mean, I'm thinking of a paper that was done with Ralph Academia and other people. But what you need to do with yours, remember, a journal article is on a very specific topic. So as I go to that paper I showed you that was done on Nigeria in terms of work-life balance, it's not enough just to state that. You need to explain to the reviewers, what is the context? You see, you can't just say, well, this research makes a difference because it comes from a country in the global south. Remember, many of your reviewers they've only been like fish in a water. They only kind of know their own environment. So it's up to you to say, what is it about this context, the features of that context, that's different from quote unquote what might be in the West? Okay, so for example, in terms of South Africa, so if I said to you, you know, if we take a concept like the heroic leader, you know, where a lot of the research from the West focuses on the single leader who single-handedly, heroically saves his or her company. Well, in South Africa, I learned, South Africa generally is a very collectivist culture. So leadership has a different understanding. It's not always just vested in this act of a single person. So I would have to explain that to people, you see? So don't just say our context is different, paint the contours. How is the context different, okay? What are the assumptions of that theory that don't apply to this context? And that will help you to get the reviewers to understand.
Thank you. The next question is, my research is around decolonization in management education. Does this fit with EDI?
Definitely, yes. In fact, I'd like to see more papers on decolonization. Because you see, again, if who gets disadvantaged if we don't decolonize management education? See, it has an inequity built into it because our students are from all over the world, first of all, and so there is miseducation, which is an inequality for some groups. So again, anchor it back to the question of inequality. What is the problem that's created if knowledge is not decolonized? So yes, we're open to decolonization theory. I would like to see more of it, especially as it pertains to how do we change organizations to be more equal spaces.
Thank you. I'm just looking if we have any more questions. Right, Stella, it looks like that's all the questions that we have for you for the
Great.
time being.
Fine.
But thank you so much, especially sharing your insights for ECRs and how to think about the theoretical contributions in a context. Uh, Similar to you, I also did my PhD in Australia, working in the Australian context, but having moved back to India, now I'm grappling with those same questions, right? I mean, the context is new, it's unique, but how do I think of the theoretical contributions, explaining it to the reviewers? So I found this to be personally very useful, and I think our attendees would agree as well. Um, and thank you for also sharing with us the openness of EDI to critical work and your commitment to not just academic knowledge, but practical knowledge. And kind of, you forced me also now to think of that question, that what is a manager going to do with this? How does this change management practice? So I think that's a real, that's a critical takeaway for me personally as well. So thank you once again for taking time out today to do this for us. Now, before we close, I just wanted to draw everyone's attention to our forthcoming event. Now, this is happening on the 24th of August, and Stella was talking about the Global South. So the next event actually looks at evaluating the resilience of women during the pandemic, the second wave of pandemic in India. And it's a unique combination of academics as well as people working in the development sector, as the study was done in collaboration with World Vision India. So that's happening on the 24th of August. The next PTW in Publishing Critical Work series, we will keep you updated. So I would just request all the attendees, if you don't do that already, please follow us on Twitter, CMS InTouch, and you will get information about our upcoming events, so that you'll know what's happening. We're also on LinkedIn, so please follow us there. And the other great thing is that we have a YouTube channel, CMS InTouch. Please subscribe to that. All of our previous recordings of all our events are uploaded there, so you can always go back and look at those. Today's webinar will also be uploaded there shortly. So please subscribe to our YouTube channel. Now, if you also have an idea to do a CMS InTouch event, maybe a webinar or anything, right? Please feel free to write to us. We're always looking for great ideas, and we'll be more than happy to work with you. So our email is cmswebinars@gmail.com. So do get in touch with us. Right. So that's all from our side today. Again, a huge thank you to Stella. Thank you to all the attendees as well for not just joining the webinar, but also putting some really important questions. I found this to be very, very, very informative. I would also like to thank my CMS InTouch team members. Kat is there, and Alex is there, Ritesh is there for helping us out in the background. Thank you very much, and see you next time. Please continue to be safe. Thank you.